that Scrooge, he really grinds my gears. He really, really. Oh, hello. Sorry about that. You caught me in a bit of a rant there about jolly old Scrooge. He's a bit of a humbug is the easiest word to use that gentleman. But don't worry about that. You don't want to hear about Scrooge on such a jolly holiday, do you? Really? You do. Well, are you sure? I know the stories I've told so far, you had violence at the beginning, and we kind of brought it back to the real spirit and joy of Christmas on Miracle on 34th Street. But are you really sure you want to hear the story of Ebenezer Scrooge? Like, it's not really a happy one. You do? All right. Okay, I guess I can tell a story, a Christmas carol, you might say, of Ebenezer Scrooge. Sit down, as always, get yourself nice and warm. Some hot chocolate is always on the go. I've actually added marshmallows and cream now, just for anybody who is likely inclined. I know I am. A bit of Belgian chocolate sauce on top is very, very delightful. So get yourself sat down, and we will get into the story of a Christmas carol about Ebenezer Scrooge. I promise you it's not going to be a positive one, but I will try my best. So welcome everybody to my Christmas episode of A Christmas Carol, specifically the one from 2009. So I really enjoyed this movie. So this one is the Jim Carrey version. The Robert Zemeckis sort of 3D live action animated movie. Now, I can probably hear you all saying, Luke, why are you not covering The Muppets Christmas Carol? The Muppets Christmas Carol is the best version of the story, and I completely agree with you. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Luke, if you completely agree with us, why are you not covering that film? And for the simplest reason, there's two reasons. Number one is that I do want to look at Muppets in the future, and I want to look at them all in order. I want to look at the Jim Henson Company. I want to look more into that, and I want to go from like the first Muppets movie, official movie, and then work my way up all the way to like Muppets Christmas Carol, Muppets Treasure Island, and Muppets Wizard of Oz, which I think is the last one they did before they did the Disney sort of remakes. So, I want to look at them in order. So I kind of don't want to jump the gun on them. I want to kind of build up to it. So that's the reason. That's reasonable one why I'm not looking at Muppets Christmas Carol, even though it is the definitive best version. Number two, I really like this movie, and that's the whole point of this podcast. As I keep saying, is that I love to talk about things and movies that I feel like don't get enough love, that feel like don't get enough appreciation, that are really, really good, but are underlooked, very much under the radar. And I feel like this is one of them movies. So that is a reason why I'm talking about it as well. I've got a lot of fun memories about it as well. So it's a film that I just felt like, it's one that I really, 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 really want to talk about. So before we get into all that and we get into my memories, a little bit of housekeeping, because we've got to warm up a little bit. We've got to get ourselves into it. And like I said, if we're going to talk about Ebenezer Scrooge, we've got to get ourselves into a bit of a happier mood. So before we do all that, make sure that you follow me on Twitter. Make sure that you follow me on YouTube. Subscribe if you're listening, like, comment, and all that jazz. If you're listening on Spotify, don't forget to give me a follow and to rate the podcast. I'm currently at 48 ratings, so if we can get to 49 to 50 ratings, it's wonderful. Like, there's 145 of you now, so if just a few of you just rate the podcast if you haven't, that will put me up in the algorithm and I'll be shown to more people, and then we can go into 2026 in a really good positive light. Also, you can find me on TikTok as well, so just type the Howdy Beans podcast and you can find me on there. So as I said, I've got a lot of memories with this movie. I actually went to cinema to watch it. I remember seeing the trailer for it. I'm a big Jim Carrey fan. I love Jim Carrey. I love Robert Zemeckis. This was around the time as well of like Polar Express, and I think it's like Mars Needs Moms, or maybe Mars Needs Moms came later, but of this era of these like live action animated movies. And granted, it's kind of funny. Like I think Polar Express came out in 2004, and I remember watching that movie, and even then, I was still blown away because I've never seen anything like that before. But it was still that very uncanny valley of like, something seems a bit off here about this film. And then you watch it now, and you're like, oh, okay, like it's still good, but it's a bit, there's still single like, not sure about this one as well. Also, I find it very greedy in that movie that basically Tom Hanks played majority of the roles. I think he played mostly all of them, to be honest, but it's neither here nor there. And I remember this sort of era of these sort of movies, and I think this was probably one of the last ones, or I think it was Mars and His Moms was the last ones they did. And then they was like, look, they're not making enough money, they're too expensive to make, we're not doing them anymore. But I feel like with this film, they really hit the nail on the head. They really sort of perfected it, where they managed to get a brilliant story, a brilliant cast of characters, and tell a very warm and beautiful classic, but in a different medium, in a brand new medium, and I really like it for that. And I feel like Jim Carrey did a brilliant job. I feel Gary Oldman did a fantastic job. Even though, admittedly, Jim Carrey does play a lot of the ghosts of Christmas, past, present, and future. I think I don't know if he plays Death or not. You don't really see Death's face, but still, like he plays all the different characters, and there's a younger Jim Carrey. And like, yes, you can probably say there's a few parts where the sort of animation doesn't look brilliant, but I just have a lot of fun memories. Like I said, I remember seeing the trailers, being blown away, loving Jim Carrey, going to cinemas with my mom, watching it, really loving it and enjoying it. Thinking, okay, this is dark, but also very accurate to the source material. Like they use a lot of the lines from A Christmas Carol is in this. Really, I'd probably say it's close to being a very authentic experience of A Christmas Carol, which again is a beautiful story. Which I read the book when years and years ago, and I just really love it. I do, and again, like I said, I just feel like it's one of those films that just deserves a lot more appreciation, a lot more love than what it gets. Sadly, like there are many movies out there in versions of Christmas Carol, I should say. But I feel like this one for me is just one of those where it was like, it was new, it was a different medium, a different sort of thing. But I love the art style, I love the feel of it, I just love the whole Christmas thing about it. And then again, it comes back to the fact the lead actor Jim Carrey, I think he just did a brilliant job of playing Scrooge. He did a really good job. And when you look at the behind the scenes of them acting it out in full mo-caption sort of suits, and you watch them do it, because like one of my favorite movies, I'm going to go off on a bit of a tangent here. One of my favorite animated movies, which I will cover hopefully next year, is Rango. Rango's brilliant, right? They shot that two different ways, right? So they did the voice work in the studio, and then they shot each scene of that movie in live action acting. They wasn't using mo-caption. They were just acting the scenes out. If you go onto YouTube, you see the behind the scenes, it's brilliant. And like I've petitioned for years for them to release that version of the movie of all the actors together just putting on costumes and then acting out the movie. And that's how they did these live action films, is that they acted out the films. They had it all sort of planned out. And you would get like Jim Carrey, he would come around and he'd be like very sort of like Scottish, sort of a Scrooge sort of thing, and he kind of crooked his back, so he's more older, more feeble, but he's still very young in his mannerisms and his face. And again, that's what Jim Carrey's known for having a very plastic, elastic face, that he can contour his face and he can do the different voices, and he can go from being very sort of Scroogey, mean and solemn and horrible when he's like, "Back away, wench. Tuppence is tuppence," like at the beginning of the movie where he takes the two tuppence off Jacob Marley's body, which Jacob Marley needs those to pay the ferryman to transfer into other life. He doesn't care about it. He thinks tuppence is tuppence and then puts them in his bag and then goes off. Or like when the carol, again, beginning of the movie when the carol singers are singing and then Scrooge comes up and they start to get quieter and he's just sitting there looking at them, giving that stern sort of like disgust sort of face. And then he moves and you just believe in his performance in the motion capture that he's Scrooge, and I love it. I think it's great. So there's a lot of things that I love about this film, and again, we're going to get into it when we get into the review and talking about the production and stuff like that. But again, I just feel like other people really would want me to talk about like Muppets Christmas Carol and other versions of A Christmas Carol, or even Scrooge with Bill Murray, which is brilliant as well. And maybe one day I'll look into that one. But I just wanted to talk about this one because I really do have it holds a very special place in my heart, even though other people don't like it and it didn't review. It reviewed positively, but not very well, and it made money, but not as enough, and all this. That even though all that, it's still something that's really special to me. Anyway. This is a synopsis of the movie. So if you know Christmas Carol, you know the synopsis, but this is the synopsis for this version of the film. So though London awaits the joyful arrival of Christmas, misery Ebenezer Scrooge thinks it's all humbug, berating his faithful clerk and cheerful nephew for their view. Later, Scrooge encounters a ghost of his late business partner, who warns that free spirits will visit him this night. The ghost takes Scrooge on a journey through his past, present, and future in the hope of transforming his bitterness. So not just this movie, but the Christmas Carol in general is one of the best Christmas stories ever told, in my opinion. Like generally of all the Christmas and all the ghost stories, where like you've got extreme horror to Mary Shelley, and you've got all these other sort of critically acclaimed authors. I feel like what Charles Dickens was able to do here, like again, Charles Dickens is brilliant at ghost stories. So if you've never read the short story The Signalman, that one is worth reading as well, because that's brilliant. Okay. But what Charles Dickens was able to do with A Christmas Carol and to tell a ghost story, because that's what Christmas is about, really. At the end of the day, before TV and smartphones and all that, that's what you used to do. You used to gather around the fire and you would tell stories, and you would tell ghost stories, and you would tell joyful stories, you tell scary stories, and that's kind of what you did. Again, it's that same idea of Frankenstein. Frankenstein was made up within a night, really. That I think Mary Shelley, her and her friends were daring each other to make up stories, and then she made up this story of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, and then she turned it into a book. So, you know, that's how these stories used to happen. And again, that's kind of what Christmas Carol is really. It's like one of them stories you come around the table and you talk, and it's very ghost stories. And that's another thing about Christmas that's lost, is the idea of coming together and telling stories about the year, or stories you've heard, or just, you know, ghost stories and stuff like that. So I love it. Anyway, as you can tell, I really love the Christmas Carol and Charles Dickens and Christmas and all that. Anyway, so as for the cast, so we've got Jim Carrey as Scrooge. He also plays the ghost of Christmas past and present. Young Ebenezer, and I think he was some other characters in it as well. Gary Oldman, again, he plays Bob Cratchit, but I think Gary Oldman plays a few other characters as well in this. Colin Firth as Fred. Stephen Valentine as the funerary undertaker. Daryl Sabrara as Undertaker Apprentice, Sage Ryan as Tattered Carola, Amber Gainey Mareed as Tattered Carola, Ryan Okra as Tiny Tim, Bobby Page as Tattered Carola, Ron Buttiata as Tattered Carola, Samantha Hartney as Beggar Boy, Julian Holloway as the Fat Cook, Kerry Lewis, who was in Princess is it not Princess Diaries? Is it? No. Not Princess Diaries. What is it? What's he in? He's in Ella Enchanted. Princess Bride, I think. Anyway, he's in that one. Yeah, that guy. But what Bob Hopkins is in this as well, playing Fezziwig. But the thing is, what a lot of these actors, even that's just like the characters. That's just like one character, but each one of them played a different character, played different roles, so they all sort of shared different roles, which I love about that about this film is that, like, yeah, you've got your main actors, but a lot of all the other characters do the voice and do the motion capture for other characters as well, which again, I really love that. As for the production, so there's not a lot on the production, but this is what I could find. So after making The Polar Express in 2004, Robert Zemeckis stated that he fell in love with digital theatre and tried finding an avenue to use the format again. He eventually decided that an adaptation of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol would be an opportunity to achieve this. Upon rereading the story, he realised that the story has never been realised in a way that it was never actually imagined by Charles Dickens as he wrote it. As well as that, it's as if he wrote this story to be a movie because it's so visual and so cinematic. Zemeckis has stated previously that A Christmas Carol is one of his favourite stories dealing with time travel, which it is. I completely agree with him there. Next to, obviously, Back to the Future. Ebenezer Scrooge, actor Jim Carrey, has described the film as a classical version of A Christmas Carol. There are a lot of vocal things, a lot of physical things I have to do. Not to mention doing the accent properly, the English, Irish accents. I want it to fly in the UK. I want it to be good, and I want them to go, yeah, that's for real. We were very true to the book. It's beautiful. It's an incredible film, and I completely agree with him there. The Walt Disney Company partnered with Amtrak to promote the film with a special nationwide exhibition train tour, starting at Los Angeles in May 2009 and visiting 40 cities, finishing in New York City in November. The film's soundtrack was composed, orchestrated, and conducted by Alan Silvestri and performed by the Hollywood Studio Symphony. The film's music was also orchestrated by William Ross, Conrad Pope, and John Ashton Thomas, and performed by London Voices and the Hollywood Studio Symphony. Much of the film's music was based on traditional Christmas carols such as God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, Deck the Halls, O Come All Thee Faithful, Hark the Herald Angels Sings, and Joy to the World. The film's theatre song, titled God Bless Us Everyone, was written by Glenn Ballard and Alan Silvestri, and performed by Italian classical crossover tenor Andrea Bocelli. The film's soundtrack album was recorded in 2009 at the Newman Scoring Stage in Los Angeles, California. The film's soundtrack album was also released on the 3rd of November 2009 by Walt Disney Records. And that's it really for what I could find for the production. I want to talk a bit about the box office a little bit here, because I don't normally talk about it, but I want to bring it up here a bit. So, A Christmas Carol grossed about $137.9 million in the United States and Canada, and $187.4 million in other territories, for a worldwide total of about $325.3 million. Due to its high production and marketing costs, the film lost the studio an estimated $50 to $11 million. And forced Mark Zoradi, president of Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures Group and the head of worldwide marketing, to resign. The film opened at number 1 in 3,683 theaters, grossing $30.1 million in its opening weekend, with an average of $8,159 per theater. In the United Kingdom, A Christmas Carol topped the box office on 2 occasions. The first was when it opened. The second was 5 weeks later when it leapfrogged box office chart toppers 2012, The Twilight Saga: New Moon, and Paranormal Activity, despite family competition from Nativity, another Christmas-themed film. I'm going to say something a bit controversial. I've tried watching Nativity. I can't get into it. I've tried every single year. I've watched Nativity 1 and Nativity 2. I hadn't even tried Nativity 3. I have tried. It's just not for me. I get it's really joyous. I just can't get into it. Maybe one year I will force myself into watching it for the podcast, or maybe I'll do a short review for it TikTok. But I just can't. But I know how much people here in the UK love the Nativity movies. I think there's 3 or 4 of them at this stage. There are loads. So people love them. So yeah, that's all I could really find, to be honest. Like it won some awards. Well, it won 1 award. So in 2010, the Kids' Choice Award, favourite voice from an animated movie, Jim Carrey won that. It was also nominated for favourite animated movie, and the 36 Saturn Awards, Best Animated Feature. It was nominated as well for that. And that's all I could really find, to be honest, on the production. But I love this film. I do. I don't care what anybody says. To me, it holds a special place for memories of going to cinema with my mom to go see it, for it being a faithful retelling of a story that I love, and also in a medium that I know was really expensive, and I understand why they stopped doing it, because people just didn't go to them, because even though the technology was brilliant, it was still new, and even though that they was evolving it with each project that they did, it was still very uncanny valley. And I feel like if they tried doing it now the way technology and cameras are and animation is now, they probably could do it a lot better and a lot smoother. But yeah, it is very much one of the fact of, I understand why it didn't work and why nobody went to go see it at the time, but I love it. I appreciate it. And like I said, it holds a special place in my heart. So I can't wait to get into it, to watch it. And it's kind of funny. This would be the second time this Christmas month that I'd seen this film, because we were wrapping up presents and we watched, I think we watched Deck the Halls or Christmas with the Cranks. We watched one of those films. And then while we was wrapping up presents, my mum flicked on this movie. I didn't realize, and I heard the intro and I was like, oh my God, why'd you put this on? She goes, well, I know you love it. And I was like, well, I know you're not a big fan. She goes, no, you like it. That's why I put it on. And as we were wrapping presents and she went in to cook food, I just stayed in the living room and watched the whole film. So this will be the second time I've watched it this Christmas. And I love it. So yeah, I'm going to off and watch this film. And then when we come back, as always, talk about my first impressions, the story, music, production, art, overall thoughts, bit of trivia if I can find some. And then we can all wrap it up nicely. So get warm, have some hot chocolate, and I'll see you all in a minute. And welcome back, everybody. So I've now watched A Christmas Carol, and honestly, I love it. I do. The Christmas Carol in general, not just this version, but all versions, the whole story, the whole Charles Dickens, you know, tale, is my absolute favorite. I do. I just really enjoyed this story. It is a brilliant story about Christmas, about your past and not forgetting who you are and where you became from, and not letting the past affect who you are in the present, but also being aware in the present that the choices you make can affect other people, and that could affect other people's future, including your own. It's not just Christmas; it's all year round. You know what I mean? And it's a wonderful story. It's a brilliant ghost story. It's a brilliant story about life. It's a brilliant time travel story. It just is an all round brilliant classical story. And there's a reason why it's lived for so long. It's a reason why it is so widely cherished and so widely made and copied and translated. And there's so many different versions of it. There's so many different movies of it. And I agree with Robert Zemeckis. Like, I had that thought in my head, what he said in what I mentioned in the introduction, where he said he feels like Charles Dickens wrote this to be a movie without realizing it because it is so cinematic. And I completely agree. And not just for this movie, because I had that idea in my head while I was watching this, but also the fact of when you realize how many different versions of A Christmas Carol there are. There's the different book adaptations, because it's public, it's in the public domain, so you could, if you wanted to, write your own A Christmas Carol. How many adaptations there are in terms of books, plays, movies, video games, all kinds of different adaptations of it, is because it is an iconic traditional story about Christmas. And it's one of the best stories. And again, it's why it's lived for so long and why it's so widely cherished, because it's just a brilliant story. As for this adaptation, even though I do stand by what I said in the introduction, that Muppets Christmas Carol is the best adaptation, is my favorite, I have to admit again that this is honestly one that just holds a lot of near and dear to my heart. It's very special. It's very lovely. It's very wonderful. It's there's a lot of memories to it. It's a core memory. Like I said, going to cinema with my mother and watching this for the first time. And actually, I watched this again at parts with my mum, and I asked her what she felt about it as we were watching. She said to me, she went, "It's all right, but it's too scary. It's too dark." And I laughed, and I said to her, "Well, no, I get that. I do, because." She did say, like, it's too dark for children, which again it is at parts. This movie does get very sort of dark, but the original story is dark. And as I mentioned in the introduction, at Christmas time, when this story was written, and before and after, before TVs and technologies, you would sit around and you would tell ghost stories. That was the tradition at Christmas. It was a long tradition, an old tradition that we did. And we just don't do it anymore. So it's one of those where it's the fact of, I understand this version is quite dark, but at the same stage, so is the Muppets one. To be honest, you no matter what, no matter a different way you slice it, Tiny Tim still dies. No, not at the end, but like he still dies, and Scrooge still goes through his traumatic experience, going through his history, revealing all the people that he hurt. And it's meant to be a story where you learn, where you go through the trials and tribulations of one's life, and in the outcome, you change. Not everybody's perfect, and neither is Ebenezer, and there are good parts of his life and bad parts, and he needs to make the change. So he needs to visit the darker parts of his life. So for that, I get it, but I love it. I really, really do. So how this review is going to go, and talking about the story, I'm going to split it up into parts. So I'm going to talk about the beginning part, before Ebenezer changes his ways when he's just the Scrooge. And then we're going to talk about Ghosts of Christmas Past, Present, then Future, and then end it off that way. So as I was watching this movie, and I'm kind of putting my sort of reviewer cap on, I was looking to see as to why Ebenezer is the way he is. Because obviously I know why he is, but I want to see why he is, if that makes sense. I want to try and put sort of the critical brain on and try to figure out, okay, does this movie convey as to why Ebenezer is the way he is? And I feel there is a wonderful part where it really explains it. Because you get the beginning of the movie, so the Marleys were dead to begin with, or sort of one Jacob Marley. And Scrooge is there, and as I said in the introduction, he has the guy has tuppence on his eyes for the ferryman, and Scrooge, he doesn't want to give the money over. He doesn't want to do it. But he does it. Like he parlays, and he's like, look, okay, take it. But again, being the Scrooge, straight away you realize who he is, because he's like, back away, pillock. And then he takes the tuppence, and even the boy's shocked, and he's like, tuppence a tuppence, and like he's taking that away. Like he no longer has money for the ferryman, so he can't pass over, which again makes sense later when we talk about when he gets visited by Marley, but we'll get there. And as he's going through, people are singing Christmas joy, everybody's happy, but everywhere he goes, he just has this aura about him where people can just sense him. Dogs are barking at him. As they always say, dogs can sense evil. Dogs are barking at him. The carolers, as soon as he comes up and they see he's there, they all just slowly but surely, one by one, just gets quieter and quieter as he just looks at them miserably and stuff like that. And you can tell that where he goes, people kind of just, oh God, it's Scrooge, here he comes, Mr. Humbug, as they say. But as soon as he goes, it goes back to being cheery and happy and wonderful. And then he gets to his shop, his office, and 7 years pass, and you can see that the ruin and the rot is setting in. So it just goes to show that he's bad now, but he's even worse 7 years later, where the story picks up. He's even more of a black heart, and more of a Scrooge sort of thing. And he's in there with Bob Cratchit. Bob Cratchit is absolutely freezing. It's stone cold. There's only one fire on, and Ebenezer's got it. And to warm up his cold heart, really, because again, as they say, cold heart, warm hands. But I think for Ebenezer, it's not even that. I think it's just cold heart, cold soul, really. So he's warming himself up, but he'll never be warm because he doesn't hold love in his heart. So he'll never be warm anyway. No matter how much coal he puts into that fire, it will never be enough to warm his cockles of his heart. And even it just goes to show how much he cares about Bob Cratchit, because Bob Cratchit, he's freezing. He's in the corner. He's frozen. He gets like 15 bob a week, which is nothing, really. I mean, he's there freezing, and Ebenezer, like again, is Scrooge. He doesn't want to pony over the dough to pay for any more coal, so they're absolutely differing in there, And then you have Fred comes in, Fred, who is Scrooge's nephew, and I actually had a quote here that I really, really love. So basically, they go through it, and if I can pick it up, here it is. So it goes like this. So Fred comes in, he goes, "Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you." Ebenezer, "Bah, humbug. Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that. Merry Christmas. What reason have you to be merry, you're poor enough?" Which, again, let me pause here. Fred isn't poor. To Scrooge he is, but really he isn't. He's well off. He has a big house. Every room is lit. There's a fire in every room, I presume. He has, servants. Like, he's well off. It's just that he's not as rich as Scrooge because, again, he's a Scrooge, Ebenezer. He's a miser. He keeps his money to him, really. That's why it's not. So I always find that quite funny that in Scrooge's mind, Fred is poor, but he isn't. He's actually really well off considering everybody else in Victorian London at the time. But anyway, so he goes, "Merry Christmas. What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough. What right have you to be so dismal? You're rich enough. Humbug. Don't be cross, Uncle. What else can I be when I live in such a world of fools as this? Merry Christmas. What's a Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older and not a penny richer? If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding and boiled with a stake of holly through his heart. Uncle, nephew, keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine. Keep it? But you don't keep it. Leave me alone, then. Much good has it ever done you? There are many things from which I have derived good and have not profited, Christmas being among them. But I have always thought of Christmas as a kind, charitable time, the only time when men open their shut hearts and think of all people as fellow travellers to the grave, and not some other race of creatures bound to other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, Although it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good, and I say God bless it. Let me hear another sound out of you, Cratchit, and you'll keep Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament. Don't be cross, uncle. Come and dine with us tomorrow. I'll see you in hell first. And this is the part that I really wanted to get to, but I couldn't help do the whole thing because Charles Dickens is just a brilliant sort of. He has such a wordsmith. He's such a way of words. It goes like this. Fred goes, but why? Why so cold-hearted, uncle? Why? Ebenezer, why did you get married? Because I fell in love. Because you fell in love. Good afternoon. I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why can't we be friends? Good afternoon. I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and therefore, Merry Christmas, uncle. Good afternoon. And it goes on. He wishes Bob Cratchit a Happy New Year, and Ebenezer's like, good afternoon, like basically go away. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is this is my analytical part of my brain here. Well, I'm trying to figure out why is Ebenezer the way he is. And he asks the question, why did you get married? And then Fred goes, because I fell in love, right? And it's what he answers back with, because pause, you fell, pause, in love. It's that moment where I realize then it's that fact of there are many things that Scrooge is. He loves money. He's a miser. But it's not until you see sort of Ghost of Christmas Past that you realize why he the way he is. And it's the same in like the Muppets Christmas Carol and other sort of versions of the story. It's the fact of he had love in his heart, but he was blinded and he allowed himself to be taken away by the greed of man, the greed of money, the greed of wanting, really, the ego of man. It's a very dangerous thing, and he found himself in the clutches of it, so much so he was blinded by the one thing in his life. And in this story, and I'll talk a bit more when we get to Christmas Present, he found love only to lose it and to let it go. And that again, like the Grinch, which is ironic because Jim Carrey played the Grinch, but like the Grinch, his heart shrunk then because he lost that love, that last bit of love. But also, it's never mentioned, but I feel like there is a moment of possible resentment, not hatred, but just resentment to Fred, because Fred reminds him of his sister, little Fanny, which I know is funny because we're English. I mean, Fanny is the name, not as the thing. Get over yourself. It's Christmas, okay? Anyway, little Fan. Because of that, I feel like he possibly resents him because Fred reminds him of his sister that he lost, which again, he even says in the Christmas Past, she was so full of love, so full of heart, and that she's passed that on to her son, who's also full of love and joy and full of heart. And you can just feel it in the story whenever Fred talks to Ebenezer. The reason he says to him, "Why do you hate me? I ask nothing of you. I just want to be in your life. I want to be part of your life. I want you to be part of my life. I want you to be part of Christmas, one of my favorite times of the year. What have I done?" And Ebenezer just is like, "Good day, go away, like to hell with you. I'm not interested." And I feel like that's because he reminds Ebenezer of his sister, because they're exactly the same. His mother and Scrooge's sister, they're exactly the same. So that's why I feel like he kind of resents Fred. He pushes Fred away. He's like, "Look, you remind me of my dead sister." He's just not a big enough man to say it to him. And I think it's unfair that he resents Fred for that, But fair play to Fred. He tries. You can tell every day of his life he's tried. He hasn't given up even at the point of a Christmas, when Scrooge has gone through all his tribulations and he goes to Fred's party and he walks in as they're all making fun of him, and he goes, I'm here for dinner if you'll have me." There's a pause. He's like, "Of course I will." And he opens him up with open arms, like, "Come here, Uncle, come. Yes, please. Everybody, this is my Uncle Scrooge." And, it's even at the very sort of moment he's taking the mick out of him. And, you can still, he has love for his heart. So he brings him in. And that's wonderful. That's that again, that's Christmas, but that's family, that's love. That's a man trying his best to connect with the only other family he has. It's a wonderful thing. And again, Christmas is one of those best time of the years for that, you know. Um, and you can see that sort of Scrooge in this. He's just sunken into himself. He is a walking corpse. There's no life in him, really. Not just at Christmas, but I imagine all year round. There's no life for him. He just cares about what he can take from others and what he can kind of grow for himself. And the more he can hoard and the little he can spend, the happier he is in his own sort of sick way. I mean, it even shows when the guy comes in and he tries to convince them about, there's people on the streets, people are poor, people need housing and stuff like that. And Ebenezer looks at him and is like, are there no workhouses? And he goes, no, yeah, there's workhouses. Are there any prisons? The prisons? And he goes, no, they're prisons. What about the wheel? Is the wheel still working? No, the wheel is still begrudgingly circulating. And then, Ebenezer just looks at him and goes, I was worried that something had happened, sort of thing. And it's that bewilderment on the guy's face. He's like, okay then. So anyway, what should I put you down for? And he's like, nothing. And he's like, oh, you wish to be anonymous? He's like, no, nothing. I'm not interested at all. All these people that are starving and hungry, they should all wither and die and reduce the surplus population. Like, go away, be gone with you. I don't care. And again, that just really solidifies this idea. This guy is just, there is no hope for him. There is no salvation. He will die alone forever, being miserable and horrible. And you can even say that the reason he looks so old and so disheveled, again, it's one thing I was always told, is the fact of if you hold hate and disgust and negativity in your heart, that it will show in your face, it will show in your skin, that you will grow older than your days, and that you will look older and you will feel older because you are rotten inside. So your body will show that rottenness. Whereas if you hold love in your heart and joy and positivity and hold hope and belief and faith and all those sort of things, if you hold that in your heart, you will stay young and beautiful forever. Even when you are old, you will look younger than your days. It's something I was always told and always brought up to believe. And that's why I hold positivity in my heart no matter what, because I want to shine. I want to be forever youthful and young and happy. I don't want to be old and withered and miserable. You know what I mean? And that's what Scrooge is. And that's where he is. You look at him and you go, there's no way that man can be saved. But he can. And we're going to move on to Ghost of Christmas Present. But before we get there, we have Jacob Marley comes to him. And it shows him about, look, these are my bonds. These are my chains of life. This will happen to you. Scrooge says to me, but you was always a gracious man. You was always a good man of business. And he's like, business? What is business? My business was in people being hurt, people being put on the street. My business was this suffering of others. And I had all this money and look where I am now. I cannot move on. And it's that thing like, he can't move on, not just because he's chained down by the sort of mistakes he's made through his life. He's built this chain, and it's ever long, it's ever growing, of all the people he's hurt, of all the people that he's killed, and not killed, not directly, but indirectly, but all the things people have died and frozen to death and stuff like that, because he's just stripped them of all that they owe and everything. So he's built this one link at a time, and again, he can't pass on because Scrooge has taken away the tuppence on his eyes, the two coins for the ferryman, so he couldn't even pass on even if he wanted to. So he's damned for these past 7 years to trudge along the earth, atoning for what he has done. And will he ever? And he tries to say to him, like, this will happen to you. And then Scrooge is like, no, there is more gravy than the grave with you, sire. Like, there is, you are a bit of ungested beef, a bit of roast pudding, I am hallucinating. It's not real. And he's like, no, it is, Scrooge. Heed my warning. You'll be visited by 3 ghosts. And each one you will learn a lesson, and heed my warning, and heed that what they have to tell you, because you will be doomed to ever have my fate. And I don't, your heart is still salvageable. You can still, beat this and not be where I am. And Scrooge is like, humbug. No, I don't believe it. And so Marley goes. Scrooge sort of runs off sort of to bed, and he's awoken by Ghost of Christmas Past. And the ghost of Christmas past takes him to his past when he was younger, and it's a brilliant visual where he takes him back in time. He flies over London, and the next thing you know, they're in like a snowy sort of countryside, and the ghost says to him, he's like, "Do you remember this place?" And he goes, "I do. I grew up here. I remember all those boys. I do." And then it goes into the school, and you see a Scrooge that is on his own. He's alone at Christmas, and all his friends have ignored him, and nobody cares for him. And you can see where it begins, where he is a lone soul. He's always been alone. And you can see in Scrooge's face in the performance by Jim Carrey, you can see in his face where he's like, yeah, no, I was a lonely child. I didn't have anybody. I was just stuck inside. And when everybody else was going off being merry and happy at Christmas, I wasn't. I was stuck. I was miserable. Like Christmas was just a day to me, sort of thing. And then time moves on a little bit, and you can see an older Scrooge now, and his young sister Fanny, she comes in. She's like, "Oh, father, he's a changed man now. He wants to bring you home, and he wants to spend Christmas with you." And you can see in his face that things have changed. You can see the love in his little sister's heart that things are better now. And it kind of adds a bit more context. Like the reason he was always alone because his dad was mean and cruel, that he was sent away, and that his dad wanted nothing to do with him. And stuff like that. So you can see that is hope, and that life is brought back into Scrooge when he sees his sister, that there's a potentiality of things to be better. And then you move on to Fozziwig's as well. And you get to see him, and you can see a younger, more sort of older Scrooge now, working, happy, celebrating Christmas, dancing, frolicking. You look a complete opposite of the Scrooge that we've come to know already. And then he meets a girl. And as all love stories, you meet a girl, you change, and you fall in love, and life is going wonderfully. And then it doesn't. It changes. And we see a Scrooge who is older, but he's different. He's not the happy person that we saw. He's miserable. And he's sitting there with his with his I'm not sure if it's wife or girlfriend or shall we say companion. The love of his life is probably the better word to use. And she's saying Scrooge is like, I don't want to live a life where I'm poor, And then she says to him, she's like, "Would you not want to have me then, now that I no longer have nothing?" And he's like, "Oh no, don't be stupid, all this and that." And she goes, "I release you." And he goes, "What do you mean you release me?" And she goes, "Well, obviously you don't want to be with somebody, my parents have died. I have nothing left. You don't want to. All you care about is the money. All you care about is the gold in your pocket, and I can't amount to that. So I release you." And it's very sad. You can tell, again, the loss of his sister, the loss of his loved one at Christmas, his greatest love. Really just sours his heart. And you can see that this is the Scrooge that we come to know, because he has allowed that human greed to take over his love, to blind him. They call it oh god, I think it's the dragon's curse, I think they call it. Again, it's very old fantasy, but it's this idea of the reasons why dragons are so blinded by gold. The same with the hobbits in Lord of the Rings. They were not hobbits, sorry, the dwarves in Lord of the Rings. They were blinded by greed, that they didn't stop digging and that sort of thing. And it's true for not just in stories but in humanity. Like, money changes people, and you don't need a lot of money to change somebody. Only even a smallest amount of money can change people. I personally hate money. I do. When I get it, I don't want it. Because the more you have, the more it gives you anxiety, the more it stresses you out. It's horrible. I don't like money. I don't. And because I've seen what it can do to people. And it is true. It changes people. It does. And it did him. So even though he had the love of a good woman in his life, it wasn't enough. He needed more. And there's probably a lot of people in this world that we can think of that are exactly the same. And it's a shame, really. But what I want to talk about with Ghosts of Christmas Past is this thing of this idea of you can't forget the past. You can't sort of move on from the past by forgetting it, by pretending it didn't happen. As Scrooge is, he tries to, humbug, it doesn't. He tries to throw it away, but you can't deal with the past that way. The best way to deal with the past is to accept it and to realize, yes, things happened in the past. Things happen because the more you pretend it didn't happen, the more it builds up inside you, the more it hurts, and the more you end up becoming kind of like a Scrooge, really. You let it rot and decay and fester. With instead of healing the wounds, healing what's wrong, you allow it to fester, and this is what Scrooge basically did. He just allowed it to fester, to grow, to get really hobbled and old and decrepit. Where Scrooge is old in this story, but I feel like he's still young, but he's just young and withered, old and withered because of what he's allowed time to do to him in terms of his greed and his negativity and hatefulness. And this is the thing with the past, is like you should reflect on your past and learn from it. And Scrooge does. You'd even say so much as goes that he learns the fact of, yes, I was alone, but then I had hope and I found love and things were going great, then I lost it. And then this leads on to Ghost of Christmas Present, when he meets the better man, the Ghost of Christmas Present, and he even says to him, like, "Oh, spirit, you have a scabbard but no blade." And the spirit looks at me and goes, "Peace on earth," and all that, and righteousness. And what you actually notice if you see it, he always has his hands facing out, and it's that show is what you would do if you was ever to meet anybody on the battlefield, or you'd go to have peace talks. You would always have swords on the table, an empty scabbard, hands open, and stuff like that, to prove to the other person that you mean them no danger, that you are in peace talks, that I mean you no harm. I mean you no ill will, and I'm not going to stab you in the back, either figuratively or literally, with words or anything like that. I'm open, you can trust me. Peace on earth. And when he meets Ghost of Christmas Present, Scrooge quickly learns the fact of how his actions are affecting others, not just affecting him, but also how it affects his nephew Fred. How that Fred holds love in his heart so much, but mocks him as well. Openly mocks him. When he sits and he goes, "Oh, I'm thinking of a creature, of an unhuman sort of thing. Is it a pig? Is it a horse? Is it is it this? Is it that?" And he's like, "Well, no. Sometimes it's this. Sometimes it's that." And then somebody says, "Is it an arse?" And he goes, "Well, to some people." And the little young woman gets up and he goes, "Oh, I know what it is, Fred. It's your Ebenezer Scrooge." And he goes, "Yeah." And he has to see this. He has to witness. The many times in this, he tries to look away. And each time he is shown, spirit, he knocks him on the head or turns him around, like, "No, you have to watch this. In order to learn, you have to accept that this is how people see you now. Because of your actions, because of the way you've treated others, this is how people see you. It is not nice, but it's your own doing, and you've made your bed, and now you must sleep in it and observe it. You must watch." And he gets to see how Bob Cratchit lives. And I feel sorry for Bob Cratchit, because he does his, Ebenezer goes, "Oh, why are we going to this hovel for? Why are we going here?" And the spirit is like, "Well, this is your apprentice. This is what he can afford on 15 bob a week at this small house." And Ebenezer, you can tell he's never been there. He's never paid attention to Bob Cratchit in his life, really, other than what he provides in terms of service to him. And he sees what little they have. They have a goose, which, even though the goose is big, that's what they used to have back in the Victorian times. Goose and duck were cheap because they were smaller birds. So you didn't get a lot of meat in them, to be honest. Even though they look beautiful and delicious, you didn't get a lot of meat in them. Turkeys were the expensive one. Turkey is what you had at Christmas, and you only had it if you could afford it, really, because it was a bigger bird, so it cost more. And that was the thing, is they have a small goose, but they're happy, they're humble, because it's this idea of they don't have much, but they have each other, and it's beautiful. And they have Tiny Tim, and Tiny Tim, even though he is crippled and he is ill, he's happy. He even says to Bob Cratchit, it's like, "I want to go to church. I want people to see me because I'm crippled, because hopefully that would put love in their hearts and accepting of others, but also show them how sort of good they have it at Christmas." He's very mature and very wise for his young and feeble age and body, really. It's a shame. But again, Scrooge sees this. He realizes, many times he wants to look away, but the spirit turns him like, "No, watch." And you can see the fact that they have nothing. You provide them with nothing, but still they have more than you do. And and it's one of those where like he you can see when he sees Tiny Tim, he goes like, "Please tell me, is Tiny Tim okay?" And the spirit goes, I see an empty stall in the close future, and I see a crutch that is just an ornament at this point. Um, and it's this thing of like, yeah, Tiny Tim, if it carries on the way it is, if you keep treating Bob Cratchit like this and not paying him enough, um, Tiny Tim will die. It's as simple as that, really. And your nephew Fred will forever go on, trying his best, but eventually, he will give up. And when again, we'll see this in Christmas Future. So the actions that you've made today and the way people see you, you don't want to accept it and you don't want to admit it, but people don't like you and you're horrible, and you can see sometimes when it's this thing of sometimes seeing how people or other people see you is a good way to understand who you are as a person. You know what I mean? It's that fact of with Scrooge, it's that idea of he didn't care what other people sort of thought about him, but really he does. And it's because he doesn't let anybody in that he doesn't see any of it. But now he has to observe it. He has to see how the world sees him. It's horrible. And it would be, for people to know that family members make fun of you and that people, this is what your actions have led to. And even Bob Cratchit is like, even though he is not the nicest person, I'm going to raise a toast to Ebenezer Scrooge because, without him, we wouldn't have this feast, even though it's only a small feast. It's something, and without him, we wouldn't have that. So it's one of those where Scrooge is trying his best to see positivity. He's trying his best to. He even says to Spirit of like, please show me somebody who at least cares about me, or at least shows me some sort of care. And that's when he shows him Fred, and he realizes, well, nobody does. Even my nephew makes fun of me. Like, what am I doing with my life, really? And you can see at this point he's willing to change. And again, this is where it gets a bit dark when he says to, of all lives, spirits quite short. And that's when the Ghost of Christmas Present, you can see on his face that he's going drawn, that he's going grey, that he's going very drawn in himself. He's losing all that weight, and he's going very much like a skeleton. And he's like, "Oh, Spirit, are you okay?" And he looks down. He goes, "Oh, Spirit, is that what I see? A claw? Is that your foot?" And he says, "Well, it better be a claw for what is left of it." And he opens up his cloak, and there's two little kids, and there's a young boy, and the boy represents all the greed and all the sort of hurt that humanity brings. And I think the girl, she represents all the fear and the anxiety and the sort of worthlessness of humans and human life as well. And sort of Ebenezer's like, "Oh, but why? What are they like?" And they grow up really quickly. And the young lad goes, "Oh, and there are no prisons." And he turns into a thief, and he's like one of the bandits, one of the people, the murderers, the killers, the people that are in the prisons, because that's what the boy grows up to. Because of this is what life in this period it sends people to, really. Yeah, there are loads of prisons, and those poor homeless kids. This is what this young lad's going to grow up to be. He's going to be a murderer, a killer, a thief. Somebody, really bad. He's going to end up in prison because you wouldn't help. You didn't care about the young. You were the needy, the people that needed money, who needed it more than you did. You said, "No, is there no prisons?" And this is what happens to those kids. And you said, "Aren't there no workhouses?" And the young girl, she grows up and she's all attached. She says, "Aren't there no workhouses?" She goes crazy and deranged. You can see that she's had a hard life, to the point of they put her into a straitjacket and they wheel her off to the loony bin. And again, it's that same thing of like, those are representations of humanity, but there's also representations of not just humanity, but also where you've led it, where people like you have allowed it to get to. You've allowed it to get to that point where that young boy has nothing, so he grows up to be a bandit, to a bad person, to a murderer, to a thief. The young girl, she grows up in workhouses. She's used and abused, and you can think of other things as well. And she goes mad, and she's put into a loony bin for the rest of her life, where she has all amount of horrible Victorian sort of medical things happening to her. Really, that it's just torture now that we know now, and stuff like that. And he's realizing, he's like, I'm spirit. I'm sorry. I'm spirit. Like I didn't mean to. And then the ghost of Christmas future, which is death, shows himself to Ebenezer, and he kind of chases him as death does. Death chases all, and I love this scene because it's that scene of where he's been made small, both figuratively and literally. He's been made to feel small. He's being chased by death through the dirty streets of London because he is a very small man now. He's no longer big. He's a very small man. Nobody cares about him. He's sort of minute. He's bacteria. He's dirt. He's a piece of trash. Nobody cares about him. He's just there. He's an observer watching. So he's being chased by death through the streets of London. And as he goes through, he sees, Mrs. Dipler, his maid, that she basically, he died and left nothing to her or anybody else. So what does she do? She takes the sheets off his bed, his warm clothes that he died in, still warm, takes his curtains, takes everything of his that isn't nailed down to sell. He sees all these, he's rich fellows, all these, he's probably fellow businessmen, I would imagine. And they go, oh, what happened to all his money? Well, I don't know. He didn't leave it to me. Are you going to go to his funeral? Oh, I might do, if there's a free lunch. So they're not going there for him. They're just going there for the food. They don't care that he's died. Oh, obviously he doesn't know it's him, but he quickly learns it's him. But we know as an audience, that's who they're talking about. And he goes like, spirit, please, please give me some hope. This all can't be bad. And then he gets to the Cratchits, and it's heartbreaking because it's all quiet and it's not merry at all. It's Christmas Day, but there's all the joy that was in the house is gone. All the color, all the hue of the fire is dim. There's no light. There's no life. Nothing. And you realize the reason why there's no life, because that spark, that hope, that joy that was in all their lives, that was Tiny Tim, has died. He's passed away. And it's this thing of what he's having to see this. He's having to watch this, and now he's not looking away. He's fully immersed, fully watching. His attention is intent on what's happening. And Bob Cratchit comes in, and they even say like he takes a slow walk now, and his walk's getting slower and slower. And he promises Tiny Tim that every Sunday he would go up to church and to go to his spot and to see him every Sunday. You can see he's breaking down and they're crying. And there's a scene that I really love in this, where Bob goes up towards the stairs, and you've got Ebenezer. He's on the stairs, and he can't see him, but they look as he's going up the stairs. Bob Cratchit stops and looks Ebenezer dead in the eye, and Ebenezer looks him back in the eye, doesn't blink, and you can see, you can hear. Again, the great acting by Jim. He's like, Bob, like he can't get the words out. He's seeing in Bob's face, and again, Gary Oldman's brilliant. You can see in Gary Oldman's face the acting, is all the emotion without either of them saying everything. They say everything. They say nothing but say everything at the same time. You can see the hurt and the pain that's inside Bob Cratchit, inside his heart, and what he's feeling on his face. You can see the regret and the sadness and the apology and the upset that's on Ebenezer's face. He's like, look, I understand. It's me that caused this. I am so gratefully sorry, but he can't say it because he's lost for words. His emotions have got him so much that he realizes, like, this is my fault. I'm sorry, but he can't say it. So what comes out is, Bob, and then he goes past him, and then Scrooge quickly moves out the way, and as Bob goes up and he sits on the bed, and you can see an outline of a young boy's body. He's just sitting there next to the bed crying, and sort of Scrooge looks at that, he's just in tears, and then he says to Spirit of like, Spirit, please, who was that man on that body that we saw earlier? Please, I must know, who is it? And he takes him away to a graveyard, and he shows him a grave, and ever so show you like the snow-covered grave is being worn off. His Ebenezer Scrooge like, no, Spirit, no, please, Spirit, no, it can't be me. And then he picks another bit off, and it's his birthday when he was born. He's like, Spirit, no, and it shows him is like December 25th, and before he shows him, like, Spirit, please, I have learned. I understand that my actions have caused this, that, I've learned from my past, and reflecting on it and understanding, where I went wrong and where I went astray. And I understand my future of all the people that I've hurt and all the things that I've done. And then, Spirit, I am sorry. Like, I didn't mean to do this to myself, to others. Like, I want to atone. I want to sort of commit to being a better person, to better life. Like, Spirit, is it possible for me to change? And he's literally fighting with death. And it's this idea that with death, that you can't run away from death, even though he tried to run away from death. It will always catch up to you, and it will catch up to him sooner than he would think, because if he forever keeps sort of hate in his heart and sort of cruelty and negativity, and if as long as he does that, he will die an early death, and he will leave with nothing, and that nobody would care. Not even Fred will care. You don't even see Fred. There's not even a moment where, like, the Spirit shows Scrooge, oh, what about my nephew? Does my nephew care? No, because probably at that stage, he's probably given up. And that says a lot. It says more than anything in this movie, really, is the fact of that one person that every year for their life, and you can tell that he's probably quite old at this stage, he's probably in his 30s, 40s, tried every single year to bring love and to bring Ebenezer in, that eventually got to the point where you can tell he gave up. That somebody that full of love and joy and hope for that his uncle would change eventually gave up, to the point of when he dies, nobody cares, really. It's just like I don't know what the word is for it, but I could imagine that anybody who'd be at Scrooge's funeral would be the priest, and possibly one or two witnesses for the death certificate, and those guys there that just were there for the food weren't there for him. I doubt his nephew would probably be there, to be honest, or if he is, he probably wouldn't stay very long. He'd probably come, say his goodbyes, and leave. And that, again, to me, that says a lot more. Not seeing his nephew in the flashbacks at all. He just goes to show that even his nephew gave up. So he learns then, and he falls into his grave, and he wakes up, and he realizes, I'm here. I'm still here. Everything's still here. And he looks out the window, and, young lad, what day is it? And he goes, oh, it's Christmas Day, sir. And he goes, oh, I haven't missed it. The spirits did it all in one night. Of course, the spirits. Well done. And that's when he instantly starts making changes. Like, young lad, it's that prize turkey, not the small one, the big one. Is it still hanging up? And then he goes, the one as big as me? And he goes, yes, oh, clever boy. One as big as you. Go buy it for me. And the boy's like, oh, Todger, or whatever name it was he uses. He goes, oh, no, I'll give you a shilling, and if you get it back here, I'll give you a full crown, half a crown, or something like that, which obviously back then was a lot of money. And he throws the money down, and the kid goes and gets it, and he goes, oh, Tiny Tim would love that. And he comes down, he goes, Mrs. Dibbler, Merry Christmas. And she freaks out, the man's gone mad. And he slides down the banister, and he dances with, dance with me, Mrs. Dibbler, dance with me. He's trying to be merry, and she runs off mad and crazy, because, again, you would do. If you knew Scrooge and she was his maid, so she knows him well enough, you would think he's lost his marbles and he's gone insane. And he goes out, and he's going Merry Christmas to people, and he's happy and joyful, and he's going on the back of the sleigh. And he as he goes, he meets that man that came into the office the day before for the workhouses and that, and try to get the poor off the streets and have them some food and warmth. And he goes, look, I owe you a great debt, so thank you for that. And what I imagine he means by that is that thing of, like, thank you for opening my eyes to change, really, that I needed to change. It was you coming in and realizing the fact of telling me all these people that are going to be homeless and have a difficult time now at Christmas. They're not going to have no food and warmth, and they're going to potentially grow up to be bad people, that I want to make a donation. And we don't hear how much he makes, but he makes obviously a sizable donation. And he's like, look, take it, please. I want to make a difference. And the guy looks at him stunned. He's like, this can't be the man that I spoke to yesterday. And he does look at him stunned. And Scrooge goes off, and the carolers, and they stop singing, and he joins in, and they start singing happy, and he drops a big coin in. Obviously, it's probably a big sovereign, or however, probably the biggest amount of coins you can drop in, the happy and cheering. And the guy's still looking at him like, oh my God, this is the man that I saw yesterday. It can't be, but it is. And he goes to see Fred, and he goes to see the meal. And just before they start making fun of him, he's like, I've come for dinner, if you'll have me. And of course, Fred pulls him in. He goes, yes, of course, Uncle. Yes, it's my Uncle Scrooge. And they're having food, a giant turkey. And like Scrooge is making jokes. He's just like, look, come to like next year, like we will have this meal at my house. It will be a big feast. I insist. I will spare no expense. After all, you can't take the money to the grave. You and they're all laughing. Ha ha! No, you can't take it to the grave. And it just goes to show that he's learnt and that he's changed. And then the next day comes, Boxing Day, as we know it here in the UK. And Bob Cratchit is late because, again, he's been very merry. He had that prize turkey. Obviously, his whole family's never had turkey before, so it was a big celebration, happy. Obviously, they don't know that it was Scrooge, but they are merry in their tidings. And they come in late, and he pretends to be old Scrooge again. He's like, Bob Cratchit, you were late. And he goes, sorry, sir. We had a big celebration. We were being very merry. And he's like, oh, I've had it with this. I've had it. Therefore, and obviously Bob Cratchit is ready just for him to get sort of reprimanded and fired and lose everything. And you can see in his face, his whole life is about to shatter in front of him. And he goes, therefore, I'm going to raise your salary. And it's that stunned look on his face. And then some, and then he grabs him by the shoulders, and in a nice way, obviously, not a horrible way. Grabs him by the shoulders, and he goes, "I'm not just going to only put up your salary, Bob, but I'm going to help you in any way with your family, especially Tiny Tim. Anything he needs, just let me know, and you will have it. I promise you." And he goes, "Oh, let's start by getting a fire on." So gives him a big wad of money. He goes, "Oh, look. Go, Bob. We're going to get all the coal, and we'll come back and we'll talk about business, and it'll be great." And he goes, "Tally ho, Bob!" And he goes out, and Bob goes out and stunned. He's still shocked, and you've got sort of Scrooge dancing in there, going, "And Merry Christmas to you, Happy New Year, Happy New Year." And then I love this bit as well. So you have Bob Cratchit turns to the camera. And he says, I'm paraphrasing because I'm not using the actual quote, but he basically goes, and he stuck to it. He stuck to his word. He held Christmas in his heart, and he's merry in his soul all year round. And Tiny Tim, who got better, as they say in the Muppets Christmas Carol, who did not die, but as Tiny Tim, who did get better, he was like an uncle, like a second uncle to him. And he looked after him, and he became the most merriest and joyous man who was ever known in London and ever known in the world. And he changed for the better. And obviously then sort of the story ends with Scrooge and Tiny Tim walking down, and you've got Tiny Tim on his shoulder. He goes, "God bless us, everyone." And then it ends. And it's absolutely wonderful. It's a beautiful story. Not just this version, but Christmas Carol is a wonderful story anyway, because it just shows a lot of humanity, a lot of soul in this fact of just, you can't forget what happened in your past. You've got to embrace what happened in the past, but not let it fester and grow and turn you in either. You've got to accept it, be open with it, and let it out, let it free. Don't let it burn your hand and hold it in your heart. You've got to let it out. And then make sure that in the present you stay open and minded to the fact of be a good person, be a good soul. You might not see any sort of things coming back to you, but be kind, be nice, do the right thing, never be cruel, always be kind. Because that's what it is at the end of the day, really. If you want a happy life, being kind and giving to others, you'll realize, and it's not just karma, but it is karma, but it's not just this idea of karma. It's true. Do good things and good things happen. Simple as that. Really, you put good into the world, you'll get good back. It's as simple as that. You put negativity into the world, you'll get negativity back. And from doing so, your future will be better, it'll be brighter. And so that when you do eventually die, you will have loads of people at your funeral. You will never die. They say that you die 3 times. First time is when you die, when the last breath leaves your body. The second time is when you are no longer when the last person that remembered you dies, and the third time you die is when the last person on earth speaks your name, and then that's it. So if you want to be remembered, probably not forever, but for a very long time, be merry, be happy, be cheerful. Everybody you meet, be kind, whether it be a stranger or it be a long-time friend or family member. Show love, show compassion, be there for people, be merry, be giving. and your name will be forever live on. So even when you die, you will know your name will live on, your spirit will live on, your memory will live on through others. They'll remember, oh, that time that Jennifer, Luke, Dave, Steve, Cody, Jake, Faye, Harry, all these different people. I remember when they did this. I remember when they did that. Remember when they? Oh yeah, brilliant. Oh, they were so funny. I miss them so much. So it's this thing of life, really. It's very fleeting. Life is very short and fleeting. But if you can hold love and hope in your heart, as Scrooge learns in this story, you will live a long and happy life. So even when it ends, it never truly ends, and that's a beautiful thing, a beautiful thought. And yeah, I like I said, I going sort of back onto sort of this movie before we wrap things up. I just want to talk about the art design and the set design. So obviously, we talk about the technology. So it's all not stop motion, but very sort of sort of CGI, sort of live action sort of animation where the actors acted out and they've got the motion captures on them, so it's all motion capped. But I love the aesthetic. Part of me would really love to have a Victorian Christmas, not a true Victorian Christmas, because I don't want E. coli and dysentery. I love the aesthetic of a Victorian Christmas. The way people dressed. There was no technology. There was a big hearty fire, and everybody was keeping warm by the fire, and people telling stories, and it was simple. It was basic. It was raw. It was organic, but it was true to humans and humanity, of coming around a fire, telling stories, swapping gifts. It didn't matter what the gift was, whether it be a wooden horse or a mirror or whatever. What mattered was that we were together around for the family. So I'd love a Victorian Christmas. It'd be absolutely wonderful to have that experience. So I love the aesthetic. I love the feel. Like, this movie really does really get that feel of a snowy London, a snowy Victorian era Christmas card. And I love it for that. So they really nail that. The acting's brilliant as well. Everybody does a brilliant job. There are moments where you can say the visuals and CGI possibly is lacking a little bit at times, again, because you can see where it's aged a bit. But, it still works. It's still really good. And it's one of those films where you watch it, you just feel warm. And it's not just because it's a Christmas Carol, but also the fact that it's really well done, well acted. Jim Carrey does a brilliant sort of version of Ebenezer Scrooge. He does a brilliant rendition. Gary Oldman is a brilliant Bob Cratchit. Everybody, the whole cast is just like believable, to the point of like some parts look realistic. Especially at the beginning of the movie, when it goes from sort of illustrated to sort of not live action to animation, where like Marley's in the casket, for a brief second, oh God, that's real. And then obviously camera moves, oh, look, it's not real, but it looks good and it still feels good to me. So my overall thoughts are, I love The Christmas Carol. It is one of my favorite stories. I love this version of Christmas Carol. It has a very warm place in my heart. Again, memories and stuff like that I'll forever keep it within me. Even though I come back to it and I say it's not the best one, because again, that's the Muppets Christmas Carol, because the Muppets will always outdo anything, because it's the Muppets, it will always be better. That even then, I still have this movie, and I don't understand why it's not as widely loved. I think it's just the technology. I think that's what it is. I think from what I've heard from a lot of people, I think it's just the technology. It's that Uncanny Valley, Pearl Express, Beowulf, Mars Need Moms sort of technology that it got better as it went on, but it still had a little bit of sort of bugs in the system, shall we say. So even though it got better, you can still see like, oh, that looked a bit off. That looked a bit off. That didn't work, and it was really expensive, and it was a lot to do, and yeah. But as I was watching this, I was sitting there going, really, I'd really love to see, I'd love to see this whole movie done in that style, like with no CGI, nothing, just full motion capture. I'd love to watch the whole film like that, just to kind of see the acting, what goes into it and stuff like that. Especially how you got Jim Carrey, how he contorts his face so much, and he plays different characters. He plays Scrooge, and he plays Ghost of past, present, and possibly not future. But it wouldn't surprise me if he did the mocap for future as well, even though you don't see the face. But yeah, I love this movie. And I hold it in my heart a lot, as everybody else should. Really, it's a wonderful movie. It's a wonderful story, and it's one of the best Christmas stories of all time. Really, A Christmas Carol, in general, is just a beautiful story, and everybody has their different version that's their favorite. I know people that love the classic ones. I know people who prefer the Muppets Christmas Carol. I know people who love this one as well. So, everybody has their favorite version of the story, but they're all the same story, just told differently. And it's okay to have a favorite or to choose one over the other because they're all special. They all are. They're all different cloths of the same sheet, really. As for a bit of trivia, so in the Cratchit home, there is a portrait of the story's author, Charles Dickens, hanging by the fireplace. Sir Gary Oldman and Leslie Mandeville play Mr. and Mrs. Cratchit. They were married in real life from 1987 to 1990 and have a son. So there's a bit of trivia for you there. The movie is set in the year 1843, the year that Charles Dickens wrote and published A Christmas Carol. At the beginning of the film, when Scrooge signs Marley's death certificate, it is dated 1836. A caption tells that Scrooge's encounter with the spirits take place 7 Christmas Eves later, making it 1843. Also, the Ghost of Christmas Present mentions that he has 1,842 brothers, which I didn't notice that, which I love that bit. Jim Carrey has described the film as a classical version of A Christmas Carol. There are a lot of vocal things, a lot of physical things I have to do, not to mention doing the accents properly. The English and Irish accents, I want it to fly in the UK, I want it to be good, and I want them to go, yeah, that's for real. We were very true to the book. It's beautiful. It's an incredible film. And I completely agree. It is very faithful to the book. It's very beautiful. It's very incredible. And it's a brilliant sort of version of the story. After sending the prize turkey onto Bob Cratchit's house, Scrooge grabs onto the back of a carriage and hangs on for a ride down the street, waving to people. Many viewers saw this as a nod to one of Robert Zemeckis' previous works, Back to the Future from 1985. However, when asked about it in an interview, Zemeckis said that that had not occurred to him, but reasoned it was a subconscious image. It didn't occur to me either while watching it, but it's true. Robert Zemeckis has stated previously that Christmas Carol is one of his favourite stories dealing with time travel, and that Ebenezer Scrooge's appearance in this film is identical to the matinee version of Scrooge seen in the Polar Express. I had a feeling it was, because I watched Polar Express and I'm sitting there thinking, this Scrooge looks familiar. And then you watch Christmas Carol and you're like, they're exactly the same, which they are. So I love that. I do. I think that's great because it really tones the two directors, the directors together. Because again, both directors did both movies, but also the technology and it kind of brings it in a somewhat sort of same universe, which I love. One final one. So during the opening credits, flying through the old London city rooftops, the second London Bridge is visible. In 1838, it was just 12 years old and remained in London for another 124 years before it was dismantled and sold to an American in 1987. It now crosses Bridgewater Channel in Lake Havasu City, Arizona, in the USA. I did not know that. I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Wow. That's interesting. No, that is generally interesting. Oh, well, if you live in that city in Arizona, you have the original second London Bridge. So congratulations to you. And yeah, that's about it, really. Oh, gosh, I've been going for about an hour and 45 minutes. This is going to be fun editing. But yeah, so I love this movie. I love the story, Christmas Carol. I love this movie. I love all versions of Christmas Carol, to be honest. I really do. Any version that tells this story, I love. Even Scrooge with Bill Murray, even though that's completely like a very dark 80s version of the story, it's a brilliant version of it. It's a lot of fun. And each version has different tales and different versions, and they tweak things and they change things, but the essence is always the same. And I love that. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this one. Sorry if I got a bit depressive, a bit low. But again, as I mentioned at the beginning, when you start talking about the tale of old Ebenezer Scrooge, it does get a little bit dark. It gets a little bit depressing. But that's the thing. That's life. And that was Ebenezer's life. But he made the change. And you still can too. if you're having any doubts or any sort of things about your life and you want to make different, there's always today, there's always now, there's always, the present. Make the change now. Don't worry about who you was yesterday. Don't worry about what happened the week before, years ago. If you have the capacity to make better in yourself and others and make change, then do it. And like I said, New Year's is only around the corner. It's very close. So even if you don't want to change now, you've always got New Year's. You've got next year, blank slate, new start again. There is always time to change, no matter how old you are, or no matter what's happened to you in your life. There's always the possibility of change. And that's the wonderful thing about being a human and about living, about life, is the fact of things don't always need to be stagnant. Things can change. It's just down to you to choose the time and the place. But you always have the power to change. So remember that. If Scrooge can do it, you can do it. So on that note, thank you very much for listening to my thoughts and feelings on A Christmas Carol. It's been absolute joy and pleasure. I can't wait for the next episode. I think you're really going to love it. You're going to really dig it. But until then, Merry Christmas. Hope you have an absolute wonderful holiday, and I'll see you all very soon.